And so we come to the end of it all. The reason that Fire Emblem February or March or whatever it is you want to call it, there's been a little schedule slip. The reason that this thing was made, we've all been building up to this moment. We've gone through every single international Fire Emblem title up until this point, but now we get to review the one that just came out. After the unyielding success of Fire Emblem Awakening, Nintendo took a much stronger interest in their series about blue-haired royals. New Fire Emblem projects were suddenly coming out of the wazoo, and Fire Emblem was getting a lot more recognition in other Nintendo games, like Smash Bros. So with Fire Emblem becoming so popular now, there was a lot more attention given to the next game in terms of marketing and development. There wasn't that overarching sense of doom that Fire Emblem Awakening had, because we weren't afraid that the game was going to get cancelled if it didn't do well. So, with that said, this is Fire Emblem Fates. Fire Emblem Fates is the 14th game in the series and the second game to be featured on the Nintendo 3DS. The game takes place in the world of an unknown name, so let's just call it Fatesland. The main conflict comes between two warring countries, the Kingdom of Nor and the Kingdom of Hoshido. Nor's King Garen wants to invade Hoshido and take it for his own, while Hoshido's Queen Makoto only desires peace. Garen is evil, Makoto is not. Nor is dark and depressing, Hoshido is bright and colorful. Have we established the literal black and white metaphor enough for you yet? However, the main force driving the game's plot comes in the form of the game's main character, Corrin. Just like in Fire Emblem Awakening, we are once again given access to a customizable avatar that we can make either male or female, tall or short, blue hair or green, etc, etc. However, unlike Awakening or any other game before it, our avatar is the main protagonist this time, and not just a supporting character. The game starts with Corrin waking up in their home in Nor, greeted by their siblings who make up the royal family. It's quickly established that Corrin has been sheltered all their life for some unknown reason. But all of that will be changing today. Corrin is brought before their father, King Garen, who seems to finally be willing to have Corrin carry out their duty as a Norian noble. And that first act is to try and murder some very attractive prisoners. Yeah, you guys don't look important at all. No, sir. After about 2 or 3 chapters, Corrin gets kidnapped and taken to the Kingdom of Hoshido, where it is revealed to them that your family in Nor isn't actually your real family at all. You actually have another family that is conveniently symmetrical to your adopted one. Garen isn't your father, but instead murdered your real dad when you were young and took you hostage, raising you as his own. You also find out you're a dragon, because why not? Anyway, your Nor siblings come to rescue you, and you are given a choice. Fight for Nor alongside the people who have raised and loved you all your life, or defend Hoshido with your biological family that also love you and have the moral high ground. And this decision is Fates' big thing. Fire Emblem Fates is a game that has multiple versions available for it, each one reflecting Corrin's choice of who to fight for. Fire Emblem Fates Birthright has Corrin fighting for Hoshido, while Fire Emblem Fates Conquest allows Corrin fighting for Nor. There's also a third path called Revelation, where Corrin chooses neither side and instead strikes out on his own to find a way to end the conflict his own way. Now, multiple versions of a game is not a new thing. Most people who see this business practice will immediately be reminded of other Nintendo games that have done this. Pokemon's the most obvious example, but other games have done it too, like the Mega Man Battle Network and Star Force series. But while you might want to compare these games to Fire Emblem Fates, it's still not really a good analogy. To put it simply, this game is more Oracle of Seasons and Ages than it is Pokemon. Fire Emblem Fates has 3 different versions of the game, but all of these versions are very different from each other in multiple ways. The front-running example would be the story and how it's presented. Unlike a game like Pokemon, choosing a path to play in Fates is a lot more than just choosing which legendary critter you want. Or, in this case, legendary little sister. There might be similar locations that you visit in both games, and you might fight similar enemies on both sides, but how the story unfolds is a different thing altogether. The events that occur in one path can and will differ wildly on another. Some characters will make it all the way to the end, while others will perish in the story. And none of that's even getting into how different the gameplay itself is in each one. As far as the general gameplay goes, Fates takes a lot from its predecessor, Fire Emblem Awakening. The general feel and look of the game is very Awakening-like, which is about what you would expect considering it's played on the same system. However, Fates improves itself over Awakening's model in just about every way. For example, characters have actual feet now. Several features established in Awakening came back for Fates, most notably the skill system, the pair-up system, and the existence of children units. Support conversations were kept the same as Awakening, meaning characters had unlimited supports and could marry another member of your army once their support reached a certain rank. Casual mode also returned, but alongside a new mode called Phoenix Mode. If you played on Phoenix Mode, then characters that go down in battle will come back the very next turn. This was essentially the mode you'd want to play if you just don't care about the strategy aspect of the game and you just want to play the story, since it's almost impossible to lose. Fates also had a sorta Animal Crossing town building element. In between battles, you'd return to your own personal castle located in another dimension. Your castle was fully customizable where you could set up various shops and other locales to help you prepare for the next battle. It was kind of a more intuitive version of Tellius's base function. You also had a treehouse where you could invite people up to bond with them and deepen your relationship. Wait a minute, there's not even a TV in here. How are we gonna watch Netflix? And this is where Fire Emblem Fates got a little weird. If you heard anything about Fates pre-release, you probably heard about the feature referred to as face petting or skinship. It was basically Pokemon Me. Except instead of petting your fire-breathing pets, you were petting grown men and women that were your subordinates. It was weird. Everyone thought it was weird. There was actually a lot of concern amongst fans before Fates' release because a lot of people were worried that the game was putting too much emphasis on the fan service. Several characters wore very revealing outfits, and images of Camilla, your older sister from Nor, were frequently posted as a joke. Also, aside from face petting, there was the fact that Corrin, like Robin, could once again marry anyone of the opposite sex in your army, including your siblings. It was a different time. Although now you can also have a gay relationship on both paths, so that's a cool step in the right direction. Face petting was removed in the Western release of Fates, probably because Nintendo of America didn't want people thinking that Fire Emblem was some weird anime porn game or something like that. Most of us didn't mind the change. We all thought it was kind of weird and not really something that we would want to take advantage of. There are some people that will cry foul and be like, "You're censoring us, down with censorship." But, you know, while I do agree that censorship in general is not cool and it's not something that really should be done very often, if at all, you have to ask yourself, do you really feel like you're losing a key function by not having this in the game? Do you really feel like you are having less of a solid experience with this game because you can't have this really odd and kind of weird feature? A lot of people were afraid that Fire Emblem was on the path of becoming a glorified dating sim and would lose the pillars that it was brought up on, but I can honestly say that it was exaggerated, at least when it comes to the core game of Fates that we received in the West. I can't speak for the Japanese version, but the game doesn't feel nearly as fan-servicey as people were afraid of. The removal of face petting was a smart choice, and while we do get a close-up of Camilla's boobs and panties at one point, or your occasionally well-endowed ninja woman, Fate still maintains the focus on war and strife that the series is known for. There's still traces of face petting with the My Castle function. You can bring people up to your room and hang out with them, but aside from some anime blushing, it's not super suggestive. The only person where the innuendo comes into play is with your spouse. And Niles, because that man is a walking reproductive organ. On the gameplay side, Fates doesn't change a whole lot after coming from Awakening. There are various tweaks to the balance, like how pair-up is no longer totally broken and can even be utilized by the enemy. It's kinda cool how much your strategy can be changed by the simple fact that when fighting an enemy, you also have to contend with his buddy who's right next to him. But while the same mechanic is shared by all three versions, that's where the main similarities end. Fates did a pretty good job in establishing how each path is unique. This goes from the makeup of your army to how the game itself is played. For starters, Nor and Oshido's varied units are mostly unique from each other. They have their own skills, weapons, and overall aesthetic that fits the countries that they're fighting for. Oshido's based off more of feudal Japan, so they're made up of things like samurai, ninjas, and shrine maidens, whereas Nor is based more on medieval European soldiers, the type that are commonly found in most Fire Emblem games. As a result, they have things like knights, paladins, and priests. Playing one path means you'll be primarily fighting soldiers of the other, and I really like this feature because aside from having to use your different units in different ways, it actually felt like I was fighting a more realistic war. I wasn't fighting a bunch of guys that were just red while I was blue, it actually felt like two different countries and cultures clashing against each other. Some units had similarities to each other, like axe fighters and Oni savages, but others were completely unique. Did you want more ninjas in Nor? Well, too bad, you're getting horses. But the other major difference between Conquest and Birthright is the main crux of the games themselves. You'll recall that Fire Emblem Awakening is considered the savior of the series, seeing as how its success would determine if Fire Emblem would continue or not. It was successful, hence why Fates even exists. However, you'll also recall that Awakening had a few shortcomings when it came to longtime Fire Emblem fans regarding things like map objectives, story, and overall difficulty. It's always interesting when this kind of situation comes around. A game with a somewhat niche fan base is suddenly thrust into popularity with the success of a recent game. I've said it before, but part of the reason Awakening did so well was because of how accessible it was to the casual market and to newcomers for the series. I don't consider this a bad thing, really. Regardless of how people feel about casuals, more customers for your product is a great thing, and it means we get more games. But it does put Intelligent Systems on the spot when it comes to developing their next title. Do they try to make it more like their older titles now that they have a wider market and also so they can appease longtime fans? Or do they make it closer to the game that's responsible for their newfound success and risk alienating the older fan base? What was their solution? To say, why not both? Birthright and Conquest are both Fire Emblem games, however they're different representations of the series as a whole. Birthright was made more in the vein of Awakening, meaning that you had the ability to grind in between story and basically play the game however you wanted. Conquest instead took a page out of Fire Emblem's older playbooks and was designed to play more like a traditional title. In Conquest, you can't grind between maps, so things like experience, money management, and support conversations have to be managed properly if you want to survive. Conquest also had a larger variety of map objectives, in addition to having a unique map gimmick on a large chunk of the game's chapters. What this boils down to is that Intelligent Systems made two different games for both of their fan bases, Birthright for the newcomers brought into by Awakening, and Conquest for the hardcore fan base. But while hardcore fans will undoubtedly clamor around Conquest as the better game, I don't think it's fair to say that one game is better than the other, seeing as how they appeal to different markets. Birthright's a fairly relaxed game. You can play it pretty much however you want and you can raise your units in whatever fashion suits you. It's easy to grind support conversations and get all the children units as a result. The story follows your typical good kingdom against the evil empire tale that's told in various Fire Emblem games. Meanwhile, Conquest is more brutal, forcing you to focus more on specific units if you want to survive. You just don't have the time to baby some characters in Conquest because every map and experience point counts. Even playing Conquest on casual doesn't guarantee an easy time because if a unit dies, then they're sitting the fight out and not growing stronger, which will come back to bite you later if you keep trying to use them. Resources are scarce and every decision is important. Unless you abuse DLC, you'll be lucky if you see half the children characters on Conquest's side. Though, when it comes to the game's stories themselves, it becomes a little bit more dicey. Birthright's story is very typical. You're fighting on the side of good and you're trying to bring down an evil dictator. There's tension when it comes to fighting your former friends and family members, but the game still unfolds in about how you would expect. I will admit that I found Conquest to be a bit more interesting, and I had been interested in it since its announcement. From the get-go, Nintendo advertised that Conquest would be about siding with Nor and trying to change the system from the inside, something that was fairly different for a Fire Emblem game. But while Corrin does eventually take the stance, it doesn't happen until about halfway through the game. After multiple assassination attempts on his life by his father. I mean, it takes Azura pulling him aside and saying that Garen is literally Hitler and Satan before he decides to turn on him. I also felt that certain things borrowed from Awakening shouldn't have returned, the kids being one of them. I like the kids as characters, but as a story element, they just felt out of place. In Awakening, you had the kids because they are coming from the future to try and stop the apocalypse. And in Fire Emblem 4, they existed because there's a time skip halfway through the game. But in Fates, the kids are kind of just there because it was a popular feature in Awakening. And don't even get me started on the excuse as to why they're adults. Fates took a page out of Dragon Ball Z and Interstellar and basically stuffed the kids into a hyperbolic time chamber until they were old enough to fight. Finally, while I'm glad that there's more depth to these games other than just being a palette swap with unique units on each side a la Pokemon, I can't help but be slightly annoyed that I have to play all three versions to get the complete story and answer all my questions. The most glaring example here are the inclusion of the invisible soldiers. You'll fight these assholes in each game very briefly, but it's never followed up on what they actually are. This is especially obnoxious where you spend an entire chapter in Conquest fighting in their own kingdom, only for it to be never brought up again once you leave. The questions you might have had are answered in the appropriately named path, Revelation, which is the third and final path that's basically a combination of the major game elements of Conquest and Birthright. But this is still a major peeve for me. I don't like it when I'm playing a game and I have to buy more of the game to understand it. A game story should leave you satisfied and content with what you have done. You might have a few questions left over, but they shouldn't be about entire hidden factions that basically kickstart the entire plot. Also, you never find out when you're a fucking dragon until Revelation. But with that said, I still enjoyed Fire Emblem Fates quite a bit. I liked all three paths, I had a good time, I put a lot of hours into it already. I would definitely recommend them, but at the same time, I'm still not really happy with Nintendo's sale model when it comes to this game. I don't like playing a game, getting to the end of the story, and then feeling like I have to buy more of the game to really understand it. It's a good thing that the game plays so well, because otherwise I'd be pretty pissed off. But all we can do now is just to see how Nintendo goes forward with the series. Anyway, that's the end of Fire Emblem February. It ran a little bit longer than I expected it to, but I had a really good time with it, even though it was kind of time consuming. So tune in next month for your regularly scheduled non-Fire Emblem content, and thank you for watching.
I like the sunshine, and I wanna nail your sister.
See, there you just said it again.
Yeah, I like Julia Roberts movies. I just wanna fuck the shit out of your sister. Well, Tyke, you would rule.
What are you talking about?
If you'd say,
It's cool.
it's not cool. I'd go pick her up at her junior high school.
wait,
Yeah,
whoa.
your sister.
Wait, that
Yeah,
sister?
I wanna fuck your sister.
No,